Hello and welcome once again. My name is Kent Trammell, and this is the 8th video in a series of tutorials covering the creation of a realistic portrait in Blender. In this video, I'll be texturing and shading the clothes modeled in part 7, and those clothes will be a mix of tiled patterns and painted maps. So this is the result from part 7. We have our clothes modeled and UV'd as well. So like I said, this will be the textures will be a mix of styles between tileable textures. For example, each article of clothing will have a different textile pattern assigned to it, which will add bump detail. And then I'm also going to paint a map that adds some wear and tear, a little bit of grunge perhaps, to each article of clothing. So I'm going to jump over to Photoshop and create our tiled textures. In Photoshop, I have two images open, and they're just photographs I took with my iPhone of two different shirts that I have, and with two different patterns. And I'm going to use these for our clothes on our model. So I need to make these tileable in here. So the first thing I'm going to do is desaturate this image, and I'm on a Mac, so it's Shift Command U, and also play with the levels so I can try and even out these highs and lows a little bit and try and get rid of the darker areas and lightest areas. So I'm just going to pull the mid arrow down a little bit, hit OK, and I'm looking for a section here that has mostly the same value going on. And this section right here seems the most visibly similar in value, so I'm going to grab a perfect square out of that. Grab my selection tool with Shift Alt held down. I'm going to just grab, try that again, grab a square out of here, something like that. I'm going to copy that, create a new image. Actually, I need to make it a little bit bigger. So let's go like that. Copy it, create a new image, and as long as it's over 500 pixels, their dimensions of it, then I'm happy. I'm going to create it, paste that in, and then scale down the image to 500 by 500 and change it to bicubic sharper, best for reduction. Okay, so this is what we're going to make tileable. And the way we check that is I go to Filter, Other, Offset, and I'm going to half my dimensions of my image. So instead of 500, I've got 250 and 250. And this shifts the image and shows you what the seams will look like if this were tileable. Make sure you have wraparound selected in the undefined areas option. So this is perfect. This is how we can test if it's tileable or not. So now that I can see it's not tileable, I'm going to, well, first let me undo that. I'm going to select this new image, copy it, then hit Command F to repeat the last filter. And yeah, so what I'm going to do is draw a cross. I'm going to about this size, let's see, a little bigger. Going to make a cross right down the middle of my seams, horizontally and vertically. Oh, should have done that on a new layer. So let me do that again. Hit create a new layer, and let's draw my crosses just right down the center. And I'm going to go to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur, and let's see, I want to blur this quite a bit because this is going to be a mask for our texture again to take away these seams. But anyway, I'm going to change it to about 25 because the very middle of this cross is still as close to pure black as it can be, but there's a nice fall off with this blur. So I'm going to apply that, create a new layer, and paste my original image before the offset. Now go back to my cross and create a mask from it, and drag that mask to the layer above it that I pasted. So this, for the most part, takes away our seams, which is awesome. But I'm going to combine all the visible layers right now into one layer with Shift Alt Command E, And now when I do the offset filter, we can see that for the most part the seams are totally gone, except for the very edges. And that's great. That's what I'm looking for. So I'm going to fix what's remaining now with the clone brush. So so what I'm trying to keep in mind during this is that this top, I'm just looking at the vertical seam now, the top of it needs to match the bottom of it. So wherever I clone, I'm going to clone this section and remember where I cloned, and then at 100% opacity, just click a couple times up there to get rid of it. And also remembering where I cloned, which is about here, I'm going to go to the bottom and clone there as well. So this way, you know, theoretically they will match up. It won't be perfect, but it won't be noticeable. So I'm going to do the same thing with the sides. Source a section, click to remove it, source that section again, and then click the other side. And this, and now when I do Command F, my seams are pretty much gone. We can see the variation, which is fine as we switch, but we don't see visible straight edges where the images are butting up against each other. So this is cool. This is what I want. Now I'm going to repeat the process for this image here. Okay, now that I have my two textures tileable, the last pattern I need to create is for the corduroy jacket. So I'm going to create a new image and just make, a new image, not a new layer, and make it 100 by 100. And let's see. Okay, so I've got that created, and now I'm going to go to my gradient tool. And the fourth option over is the reflected gradient. And that's what I'm going to pick with black and whites, just the default selected. And what I want is, let's see, if I click in the middle and drag over, I can see the gradient white in the middle and darker as it goes to the outside. That's what I'm looking for. So now that I've drawn that, I'm going to go to my levels, drag out my lightest, drag down the middle layer to expand the brighter areas, drag up the darker area to make it darker on the outside edges, something like that. And then lastly, drag out the white, the top of the white, the last arrow, sorry. And yeah, that's what I'm looking for. So this tile will give us rounded ridges all along the jacket. And yeah, so these are done. I'm going to save them out and jump back into Blender. Now with my tileable textures created, I'm going to work out their settings here in Blender. So I'm going to, let's see, I'm actually going to just move them to their own layer. With M, let me turn on my screencast keys. Okay, so I'm going to hit M and then choose the layer to the right. Now let's go over there. Cool. So I'm going to add just a plain shader. I'm going to call it gray A and change the value to 0.4 and actually maybe 0.3. So now I'm going to select everything, hit Control L to link all materials, and going to turn off the specular intensity completely. I'm going to go through and duplicate each gray shader per article of clothing. So, whoops, let me, now with the shirt selected, I'm going to hit the plus button over the materials panel to make it gray A01, and then change it to gray B. Same thing for the tie, and change it to gray C. Cool, so let's start with the corduroy jacket. Let's go to the textures panel, add a new texture, call it, let's see, tile ridges, and it's going to be an image. The mapping coordinates are UV, and I'm going to turn off color influence, turn on geometry influence, and change the value to 0.5. Let's see. I'm going to change it to the bump mapping quality to medium. And let's see. So my image I need to pick. I'm going to go find that. Tile ridges. Cool, cool. And so I'm going to change the size, because right now that tiny texture 100 by 100 will be applied to the entire, just that one little section will be, you know, mapped to the entire jacket. So we want the tiles a lot smaller. So let me, we're going to start at 300. 300, 300, 300. See what that gives us. And let me make sure my settings are all there. Oh, I'm going to turn on minimum filter size and change the filter size to 0.1 instead of 1. They probably do the same thing, but anyway, I always do that to both settings. Okay, so now I need to shift select my first layer, because that has my lights and everything in there, and I'm going to render and see what this gives us. Okay, so we see that we have corduroy ridges happening in the jacket. They're too big. I want them to be skinnier, so I'm going to escape and change the size to 600. And it's a little backwards because I'm increasing the size, but the texture is actually, each texture tile is decreasing. So that's a little backwards, but that is what's happening. So now I'm going to test with 600, size of 600. Yeah, this is more what I'm looking for. So that's a good corduroy size, and I'm going to jump over to the shirt and add a new texture. I'm going to call it Tile Fabric A, and it's going to be an image. It's going to be UV as well. I'm going to uncheck color influence, check normal influence. I'm going to make this 0.75, and method, I'm going to make the bump medium quality again. Open my texture, which is Tile Fabric A. Let's see what else. Also going to turn on the filter size, change the filter size to 0.1. Check minimum filter size, and image mapping. No, not image mapping. Okay, so back to the mapping tab. I'm going to make this size 10, 10, and 10, and let's just start there to see what that value looks like. Okay, so that looks all right, but the pattern's still a little bit too big. I think the value of 0.75 for the normal influence is pretty good, but I'm going to change it from 10 to 15, not quite double it. Let's try that again. That's better. I like that pattern size, definitely better. But we can see a problem here with the solidify modifier. It looks like the UV mapping option is not cutting it. It's causing some weird artifacts to go on in the where the solidify fill faces are. So in order to fix that, what I'm going to do is go over to the material. I'm going to add a new slot, pick the same gray B shader, and then I'm going to duplicate that and call it B2. And in my texture panel, I'm going to change the mapping coordinates to object and change the size to 40, 40, and 40. And this should take care of that. Okay, so that didn't fix it. I forgot to change a setting. So go to my modifier panel, and in the solidify modifier, there's an option here. It says rim, and it says offset material index of generated rim faces. So right now I have it set to 0, which means it's still picking the first material slot for my object. So I'm going to change that to 1, which means it'll pick the second material. So that should fix it now. There we go. That's what I want. So no more artifacting happening with the solidify modifier, and now I can just address the tie. So I'm going to go to the tie's textures and add a new one, call it tile fabric B. It is also an image texture. I'm going to pick UVs for the mapping, and I'm going to set the size to 15 as well. Ooh. Make it the same as the shirt. Uncheck color influence, turn on geometry. I'm going to leave it at 1, and then open my last texture, my last tileable texture, fabric B. Change the bump mapping quality to medium again, and also the filter size to 0.1, minimum filter size. And that should be it. Let's see what that looks like. There we go. Those are some. I'm happy with those values. Very cool. So now I want to add stitching detail into the bump. So I'm going to bake out a displacement map for each article of clothing. And since I've already covered that with the head texture, I'm going to skip it for the sake of time. Back in Photoshop, I have my displacement maps opened and combined. I baked the shirt and jacket out separately and just combined them here in Photoshop. And the whole purpose for baking out a displacement map is to give me a guide for painting my stitching seams. We can see them here as they show up in the displacement map. So that's the purpose for that, and my stitching source is going to be this photograph that I just took with again with my iPhone, and it'll be exactly what I need. So I need to neutralize this, and I'm going to select a chunk of it, just a rectangle of it, hit Command N for a new image, and paste that. It's okay. I'm going to desaturate with Shift Command U, and let's see. I'm going to turn off my background and start erasing. Well, first let me rotate to get it as straight up and down as I can, like that. And then I'm going to actually first go to Filter and Liquify. No, not liquefy. I take that back. I'm not going to liquefy it. I'm just going to warp it. Command T, right click, and warp. And I'm just wanting to get this line straight rather than on a curve like it was. Cool. Now with my erase tool at 100%, I'm going to just start erasing. And do it to the other side. Wow, Photoshop is slowing down with Camtasia running. Alright, delete everything. There we go. So these are going to be my stitches. Also, another photo source I'm going to use is this right here, another iPhone photo that's just going to take this buttonhole stitching detail and copy and paste that into my texture. But with my stitches now ready to go, I'm going to select it. Well, I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to copy and paste a bunch of times and just move the stitching into place. So I'm going to time lapse this process because it's a little tedious and time consuming. Now with this first stitching section done, I'm going to add a new layer and fill it with a color, with a 50% gray color. And this is going to just serve as the base, because in a bump map, 50% gray does nothing. For these first two layers, I'm going to change the blending mode to multiply, and just save it out and see what it gives us. Back in Blender, to test the stitching, I'm going to select the jacket because that's the section I have addressed so far. I'm going to add another texture and call it stitching bump. Let's make it an image. It's going to be UVs as the coordinates. Uncheck the color influence and check the normal influence. Let's make it 0.5. I'll just leave it at 1, whatever. And change the method to medium quality. Typical stuff, filter to 0.1. Minimum filter size. Let's open our image. And for the blending mode, I'm going to change this to multiply. And so it will multiply over the bump value of the tile ridges. So let's do a render and see if that's doing what we want. Okay, so with this finished, we can see that the stitches are showing up, and it's not terrible, but the let's see, if I go back to Photoshop, we can see that the texture on the side is competing with our corduroy, and it looks a little bit off. So in here, I'm going to try and edit that out. And how I'm going to do that is, let's see, with this first layer, this top layer selected, I'm going to create a mask for it, and then select the mask. So that's what our mask looks like, and then I'm going to just address the levels of it. So with the mask selected, I'm going to hit go into the levels panel, and let's drag up the middle section so that it gradually gets rid of that texture, and it should just leave us with the stitching. So that should be a little bit better. I'm going to save this out and test render again. So with my file saved, I'm going to go to my image and then refresh the source. Let's change it to slot 3 and let's render again. Okay, there we go. That's what I'm looking for. Now the two different textures aren't competing, but you can still get the feeling of these stitches in the corduroy. I'm going to jump back into Photoshop now and finish the rest of the stitching textures. Okay, so using the same method I used on this panel, I've now copied the stitching all the way around, and so yeah, this is done now. I'm going to save it out with the 50% gray, make sure that's the visible one instead of the displacement. So with 50% gray shown, I'm going to save this as a JPEG, and now we're ready to refresh our new texture. So over here, I'm going to refresh the new texture, and I've also added this to the shirt. So in the texture panel, it's the same, the texture properties, it's the same stitching bump, and I've changed the normal value to 2, and also the blend mode to just mix and not multiply. So everything's good to go. And now when I render, we should have a better stitching result. There we go. That's the stitching level of detail that I'm looking for. So cool. So that now completes the bump. Oh, no, I'm sorry. One last thing is the button detail, the button stitching detail. So let me jump back into Photoshop and add that real quick. From this image, I'm going to take the stitching detail right here, I'm going to copy it. Let's see, jump back over here and turn my displacement on, paste this in, and desaturate everything first. And let's start scaling this and transforming it into position. So that'll be good, and now I just need to erase the excess. Now that that's scaled and cleaned up, I'm actually going to go to, on this layer, I'm going to add a layer style and an outer glow. And I'm going to change it to multiply and the color to black. And let's increase the size and keep the spread down a little bit. The spread at 1 and the size to about 20. And let's see, make it about 50% visible, 50% opacity. And then let's see, it's too bright. I'm going to just bring it down in the levels to try and match the rest of the stitching, something like that. Cool, that should look decent. Now I'm going to duplicate that with that whole layer with Command J, and just move it all the way down here to the other corner. Alright, so turn back on the 50% gray, and actually now that I see the stitching with that outer glow, I'm going to decrease the opacity to about 20%. Do the same up or this other layer. 20%. Okay, now I'm going to save this out, and that should be it for our stitching detail. Once again, I'm going to reload the texture and render it one more time. Okay, that looks pretty good in there. To be completely honest, it's probably not going to be seen. I have actually forgotten to model the buttons, so I'm going to need to do that, and it's probably going to be covered by the buttons. But anyway, this is the stitching detail that I'm pretty happy with. Next, I'm going to paint a color map for our clothing. I'm going to paint this in Photoshop because I've got my working file open, and I'm going to use the displacement not only as a guide like I did for the stitching, but actually I'm going to use the tonal changes here, the value changes, as a base to give a little color variation to my shirt and my jacket. So I'm starting here with my displacement. I'm going to create a new layer and go to Filter, Render, Clouds, and this will create a basic noise texture, and then I'm going to go back to Render and Difference Clouds. And this just furthers the noise procedural, and I'm going to use this very, very subtly. But I'm going to hide it for now, create another new layer, and this is going to be my base color layer. So I'm going to select my shirt, where I know my shirt UVs are laid out, and just fill it with a blue color, a very light, or kind of a mid desaturated blue. And now I'm going to select, well, might as well just invert my selection, and then fill it with not the gray but the blue, and then invert it, and then I'm going to hide that layer. And now I need to create a mask from this displacement. So I'm going to duplicate the displacement layer, crush down my whites, and then there's a couple discrepancies, so I need to fix those black dots, black holes in the white area. And now this is going to be used as a mask, so I'll select my base color layer, drag out a mask, select my new cutout mask, copy it, and then paste it into the mask of the base color. And now I can get rid of that. And so now we've got a nice clean cutout alpha of my colors. And then I can change my displacement layer to an overlay, as well as the procedural noise to an overlay. And again, really subtle. I'm going to turn it down to about 11% or 12%. I'm going to create one more layer, and I'm going to call it HL for highs and lows, and change the blending style to overlay. And now I'm just going to, with black and white colors, just start to paint in some darker areas, sort of like burning inside the stitching area. And this is just going to add a little bit more wear and tear, perhaps a little stylized, but I'm not going to be afraid to go a little far with it in here, because I can always pull it back in the texturing in Blender. So I chose to go darker inside the stitching because it's more of a canal. So in theory, you know, dirt and grime is going to collect there, whereas beside that, it's usually a ridge along the stitching. So that's what I'm concentrating on there. For the other section, the displacement's a little bit too bold, and so I'm going to select a medium gray, just 50% gray, and start painting with about 50% opacity on my brush, and start painting out the extreme highs and lows, and because it's just too much. So that's how I get rid of it, get rid of the displacement influence so much. And I'm going to do the same thing on the jacket as well. So now I can continue with my highs and lows inside the seams, the stitching of the jacket, and I'm trying to be very free here. This is not high quality painting by any means. It's just accentuating the seams basically, and the ridges around the seams. So it should show up pretty nice, but still subtly in Blender and the final render. But just going around all the edges. So I'm going to be satisfied with the color painting for now, and I'm going to save it out and then jump back into Blender. So it's time to finalize these clothing materials, and I'm just going to pick the shirt. We'll start there, and I need to rename these properly. Get my pen out of the way, and let's just call this shirt base, and jump into the texture panel of shirt base, and let's add a new texture. I'm going to call it clothing color. It's going to be an image. This is probably monotonous to you, but UV coordinates, and let's grab clothing color. Cool. Turn minimum filter on and filter size to 0.1, just out of habit. And cool, so that's set up. Now I'm going to select the second, my second material slot, and then just choose the shirt base material, because we're going to, how about we just do a render so we can see what's happening with the shirt color on the shirt. Okay, so perhaps as expected, the highs and lows are a little extreme. It's almost looking like a denim shirt right now. So that's okay. I'd rather have more than not enough. So let's, what am I going to do? I'm going to go to the material of shirt base and change the color to kind of match up with our diffuse texture. So it's kind of a blue. Yeah, I think that'll be fine. It's similar blue. And then in the texture panel, I'm going to just change the color influence to, let's just go to like 0.4. Let's try that. I like that a little bit better. So I need to again repeat my step of fixing the solidify modifier faces. So I'm going to create a third slot, pick shirt base, and let's see, duplicate it, name it shirt base 2, and go back to the texture panel. We'll keep the color. No, I'm going to turn off the color influence. Just remove that texture out of there, and delete the stitching bump texture. And for the tile fabric texture, I'm going to pick object and change the size to 40, 40, and 40. With the color right, I can go with my solidify modifier and change the rim material to number 3. No, number 2 actually. Yes, number 2. It's a little confusing. Sometimes when you're picking a material index, it'll start at 0, which really means your first material or your first material slot, or sometimes it'll start at 1. But anyway, so with my materials set up now, that's fixed, and I'm going to do one more render just to prove it to myself. Indeed, the edge is fixed where the solidify modifier is adding thickness, so that's wonderful. The last thing I want to do for this shirt involves the nodes. So in this first slot, I'm going to clear the slot, add a new material, and this is going to be called shirt node. Shirt nodes, and I'm going to turn on use shader nodes to render the material, and then switch this part of my UI layout to the node editor, and make sure it's on a material nodes. And cool, so we have a material slot here by default, a material node here by default, I'm sorry, and I'm going to select our shirt base. Cool. Now I'm going to add a couple more nodes. The first one is going to be geometry. The second one is going to be normal. Let's see, where's it at? It's in vector normal. And the last one is going to be a color ramp. It's in converter color ramp. So I need to explain my goal and purpose for adding these 3 nodes. And I've heard it called a fall off shader, but what it's doing is sort of cheating a fuzzy fabric feel. And so as the faces start to face away from the camera, as the surface starts to face away from the camera, these nodes will start to lighten the diffuse texture, the diffuse color, I'm sorry. And what this will result in is a softer, sort of a fuzzy feel to the fabric. So back to my nodes, I'm going to grab my the normal output from geometry, plug it into the normal input of the normal node, then grab the dot output, plug it into the factor, and let's see, I need to switch, first of all, switch the color ramp, so with that F button we'll switch it, and then I'm going to change my interpolation to B-spline, and then I will drag the white out a little bit and drag the black up to about there. And so then I need to add one more node actually, and that's going to be color mix. And the color is going to go into the factor. The color from color ramp is going to go into the factor of the mix node. And let's see, the first color slot, I'm going to click and then grab the eyedropper, and I'm going to eyedrop the color from the material node. And so then let's see, the color 2 slot, I'm going to pick the same color, and then just make it a little bit lighter, just a little bit lighter, not much. I probably went too far. Okay, cool. So what this is doing now, the output for this color ramp, which let me go ahead and drag it over here so we can see what's happening. If I zoom in, we can see now that in our material preview, the outer edges have this sort of glow, this lighter color, and as it, if you think of this as a sphere, as the sphere starts to face you more directly, the light color turns to black. So that is what our factor is. So the white on the outer edges, once we plug it into the mix node, the white on the outer edges will have this lighter color from slot 2 over top of the slot 1 color. Okay, so now I'm going to drag the color output from the mix node into the color input of the material node, and drag the color back to the output. And I'm going to do a render and see what that gives us. So now when I switch between the version without the fall off shader and the version with the fall off shader, I want you to pay attention to the edges. As I switch, you can see them start to brighten up. Everything doesn't brighten up, but just around the edges. It's very subtle, but the whole purpose is, again, to fake that fuzzy feeling. So I'm going to be happy with that and move on to the jacket. And it's actually going to be pretty much the same base material. So what I'm going to do is select the second slot and choose the shirt base material. I'm going to duplicate it and call it jacket base. And this jacket base material needs to change to that khaki color that we like. And then I'm going to jump to slot 1 and select the node material, the shirt node material. Okay, we're just going to use this same setup for the jacket, and I'm going to now go to my material node and select jacket base. Whoops. Because I didn't duplicate this shirt node material, it made the change to the shirt as well. I need to duplicate this shirt node material. Let's rename it to jacket nodes. And okay, there we go. And now with the jacket nodes material selected, I'm going to select the material node and select jacket base. Jacket base, and I'm going to cut the connection from the mix node. First, the color of slot 1, I'm going to color pick the color from jacket base, and then the color slot 2, I'm going to color pick the same color and just increase its value a little bit, make it a little lighter, and then drag that into the color slot, and let's render that. Well, first let's render it without the fall off, and then render it with. With this material, I actually think that the highs and lows of our color texture aren't showing up enough. So I'm going to first change the influence. Let's just put it at 0.8. And then render that again. Yeah, I like that a little bit better, a little more gritty, I suppose. And so now with that, I'm going to switch render slot to 4, drag in the color output from my mix node into the diffuse color, and render the comparison. Now as I switch, again, pay attention to the edges. Oops. Oh, I forgot my corduroy pattern. Gotta fix that. So anyway, as I switch, pay attention to the edges, and you can see, like, look over here, and you can see how it switches and becomes lighter. It just kind of gives that fuzzy feel. It's pretty subtle. Cranking it up too much kind of gives it a little bit of weirdness, but anyway, I'm pretty happy with that, and I really miss my corduroy. So let me jump back into my materials. So I need to switch out tile fabric A for ridges, for the tile ridges texture. And then change the size to 600. 600 and 600. Set my normal to 0.5. Okay, now let's render that. There we go, with the ridges back, that just, that feels better. And yeah, so I think that's good for the jacket. Now for the tie, we're going to get a little different. Let me select the tie, select the material, and let's rename this tie base, because we're also going to use nodes in this. I'm going to duplicate the slot, just go ahead and throw tile base in the second slot as well. Tie base, there we go. The diffuse color is going to be, let's just go with the dark navy, pretty dark navy. And I'm also going to turn on several settings. The mirror here, I'm going to turn on at 0.4%. I'm sorry, just 0.4, not percent. The Fresnel I'm going to turn on at 2, and then the blend I'm going to turn on at 1.4 about. So what this is going to do, oh wait, the gloss amount I need to change to 0.5, very glossy. And the samples I'm gonna bump up to 32 due to the low glossy amount. So what this is going to do is give me some faint reflection on the outer edges of my tie. And let's see what else. I'm going to turn on tangent shading down here, but it needs a specular to work. So I'm going to make the specular intensity 0.1, and the color I'm going to make slightly blue, something like that. Okay, so let's go ahead and do a render and see where we're at. Okay, so with the tangent shading, we can see we're kind of getting a cool result, sort of that that tie, silky-ish kind of material. I don't want it to be like a brand new silk tie, but I do want it to feel like a tie, and that's normally not like a cottony kind of feel. But anyway, that's looking okay. I think I'm ready to jump into my nodes and mess with the fall off shader again, or fall off node setup again. So in my material editor, I'm going to clear the first slot, add a new material, call it tie nodes, and turn on the node capability, and select my tie base in my material node. Tie base. Okay, so the same setup, input geometry, drop down a geometry node, also drop a normal node, and then drop a color ramp. And this one's actually not going to be a lighter color on the outer edges, but a darker color. So let's grab the normal, plug it into the normal, normal to normal sockets, and dot to factor. And let's see. For my color ramp, I'm going to change it again to the interpolation to B-spline. Let's drag up the low end all the way up to about here. Okay, and then I'm going to add a multiply. I'm sorry, not a multiply. A mix node, color mix. Whoops, not what I wanted. Remake that connection, and it's a mix node. I'm going to change the operation to multiply, and for color of slot 1, I'm going to color pick again my color from the material node, and then let's see, this time the color ramp color is going to go in color slot 2. It's going to be a multiply, and I'm going to change the value to 1. And so with this, I don't know if you're going to be able to see it in the material preview. Hopefully you can see it a little bit, but it's our dark gray and then a black on the outer edges. So let's plug that the color output into the color input of the material node, and then drag the color output of the material node to our output node. Sorry, those are a lot of similar words. Now let's do another render and see what that does for us. With that finished, when I switch back and forth, we can see that the outer edges get darker now. And this is the same, I do this a lot for silky-ish kind of materials, but I also do it a lot with car shaders. And it's kind of the Fresnel effect, where it gets darker because it's such a smooth surface, and a silkier fabric is smoother as opposed to fuzzy. It's going to give me that kind of darker edged feel similar to a car. Anyway, so I'm pretty happy with that. But overall with the tie color, I feel like there needs to be some variation, maybe like a stripe or something. Yeah, I like the idea of a stripe, so I'm going to create one real quick. I'm going to create a new canvas, 100 by 100 pixels. And this is going to be extremely simple. Just going to keep it black and white. That way I can use it as an addition or multiply operation in Blender. But let's see. I'm going to fill it black first and then draw. Let's make sure my brush is hard edged and not feathered. Opacity at 100% and just draw a line straight down the middle. And now I will draw another line, a smaller line outside that middle line, just holding shift to draw it straight, and then one more line. Let's make it black, and I'm going to create a new layer for this one. Draw the straight black line, 2 straight black lines, and then take my eraser and just start erasing horizontally. So this will serve as a tileable stripe texture that we can apply to our tie. I'm going to save it out and jump back to Blender. To incorporate this texture, I'm going to jump to my texture panel, add a new texture, call it tie stripe. It's an image type texture. Let's go find that image. And I'm going to turn off all influence because I'm just storing the texture over here. I don't want it to actually affect the material, which is the tie base material. Okay, so in my node editor, I'm going to add an input texture node, and then go select my tie tile stripe. Cool, okay, but I need to set up a specific kind of mapping for this. So I'm going to add the vector mapping node, and I'm going to drag my UV output from the geometry node into the vector, and I'm going to actually rotate my stripe a little bit. So let's rotate it 45 in X and 45 in Y. And then drag the vector output into the vector input of the texture. We can see that it shifted a little bit. And actually I also need to make the scale a little different. So let's start to scale out at, let's just do 30, 30, and 30. So this is actually the same kind of effect that comes from the mapping tab in the texture panel, except over there they don't offer rotation, which is why I'm choosing to do it in the node editor. I want to rotate the tiling. Okay, so now with that set up, I want to multiply this texture over my diffuse color. So I'm going to add a color mix node and going to make it multiply as the operation. Drag the color of the texture into slot 2 No, actually, I'm going to make it the factor. And let's change this color in slot 2 all the way to black. And you can start to see in the preview that we've got some stripes happening. So let's do a render of that and see if we like it. So by accident I turned off the bump map for the tie, which kind of made this look like more of a brand new tie, which is kind of a cool look, I guess. I'm still going for more of a worn, tattered kind of feel. So I'm going to re-add that now. And go to my material panel, select tie base, not the node material, but tie base. Select the texture, add a new slot, and select tile fabric. Well, let's see, fabric B. And set up the settings like usual. And now let's try rendering that one more time. So it's starting to come along. I think I want to invert the value of my stripe texture. So I'm going to add another node, color invert. Let's plug that in. And also I think I want my stripes a little smaller, so let's try 60, 60, and 60. And also I want to saturate my color a little bit. My base color of my tie. So I'm going to grab that blue, that navy blue, and bump up the saturation to 0.6. Okay, I'm not 100% sure about that, but what I want to try next is adding this stripe texture into my specular channel. So let's add another mix node. And this time the color output from the invert node is going to go into the factor of this mix. And well, my computer just crashed, and like a true idiot I did not save at all during that recording. But when I record these tutorials, I'm simply mimicking a source file that I created earlier. So I have no choice but to continue from the source file, which is ever so slightly different, but hopefully not noticeable. So anyway, picking up where it crashed was adding this mix node right here. And so where I got these colors for slot 1 was simply color picking the spec color from the tie base material. And then slot 2 was color picking that material as well, and then lowering its value a little bit. And then plugging that the color output from mix back into spec. So let's render and hope you don't notice the difference. So this is the final result. You can imagine it was a little bit frustrating crashing at the final step, but hopefully it didn't hinder your experience. The information is all still the same. That's going to be all for this tutorial. Next time I'll be covering particle hair, and then one more after that about the final composite. So I hope you stay with me to the end. Thank you for watching.